This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nicholas James Bridgewater. Lesson 1 of the Revelation of Baha-ullah in a sequence of 4 lessons. The Revelation of Baha-ullah in a sequence of 4 lessons, compiled by Isabella D. Brittingham, February 1902. The teachings are simplicity itself. 1. To believe in the glad tidings of the coming of God. 2. To confess his oneness and singleness. 3. To be naturalized into his attributes. 4. To come nearer the knowledge of God. And there is nothing to man but to attain these great ends. Abdul-Baha Abbas. Lesson 1. The foreshadowing of the coming of the kingdom. In the present day, there is comparatively little atheism. While many have rejected what is known as orthodox belief, yet in this age there is a recession in the tide of infidelity. Back of the law is recognized its founder, back of effect is a cause, back of life the bestower of life, and, to an extent of which it is not itself cognizant, the world is seeking light. This explains the existence of the many new forms of religious thought which are now developing. So unmistakably has the supreme pen recorded upon all things visible the majestic proofs of the invisible, that this planet is but a type of greater things, much of which, owing to man's present imperfection, is yet in cipher. 400 years before Christ, Plato said, "The visible things are but a blotted copy, a shadow of eternal ideas." Jesus Christ used physical illustrations in order to impart the highest knowledge of God. Since our environment is material in character, every messenger or prophet from God has made use of material figures in order to convey to our understanding certain spiritual realities. Thus the appearance of the founder of each dispensation is the Sun of Truth, newly arising upon the horizon of the darkened spiritual heavens, and bringing forth a new day of light. When this heavenly sun fulfills its mission, it disappears. The rays of its divine knowledge gradually grow dim and indistinguishable, and when light is lost, darkness dominates all things, corruption of the word results, and in its path follows the night of doubt, when dogma, creed, and division occupy the attention and the contention of mankind, all of which causes many to lose hope and to ask, "What is truth?" But this divine discontent is the preparation in those hearts in order that they may welcome the breaking of a new day, when light shall be restored in greater beauty than ever before. In all creation, man is the greatest kingdom. The soul of man is the seed of God, because it alone contains the essence of immortality. The beginning, i.e., seed planting, is the same for each soul, but this world spoils that soul. Heredity is but an earthly product. A perfect man is fivefold. Within this kingdom exists the elements of the mineral, vegetable, animal, intellectual, and spiritual being. The material body of man is a vehicle for communication, a thing of sensation and feeling, a symbol, by its construction, of greater things, and above all, it is a temple. Breath animates it and sustains its physical existence. Food and water are the material helpers, the body at every instant passing through the cycle of loss and renewal, circulating through it, its channels weaving like a vine with its branches, from and returning to that wonderful centre, the heart, is the blood, and in that blood exists an indescribable, impalpable substance, which is spiritual in its characteristics. Science tells us that it exists only in the living blood, but not in the blood after death. Deposited within the temple are the pearls of God's secrets, and the gems of his knowledge, and the crown jewel therein is the essence of light. Heaven and earth alone are in this kingdom, but it is man alone the only portion of creation who is able to understand the things of God, who is out of harmony. And because on this one dominant discordant note all creation is jarred upon and travaileth together, the dumb animals all about him are in many respects monumental examples to him. He alone, in whom dwells the essence of immortality, is faithless and asleep at his post. Well might he pray that he be permitted to exist throughout the duration of God's dominion, and not become as the beasts which perish. Christ predicted this when he said, "When the Son of Man cometh, will he find faith on the earth?" St. Luke 18:8. Man alone can attain the sublime heights of union with the Infinite, when the soul hungers for the knowledge of its God, and it drinks from the unadulterated cup of immortality. That crystal draught, in its action upon the soul, resembles a drop of elixir upon a piece of copper, which, cleansing from all impurity, transmutes it into pure gold. Thus, through spiritual evolution, man arises from the animal station, the station of sensation, which is our Satan, and attains the station of intellect, then dies to that station, and arises in the station of spirit. It has been said that the last degree of reason is the first degree of love. When the immortal seed has thus gained its growth, and has been clothed upon with the new garments, it stands victorious over spiritual death, and discovers its inheritance to consist of the holiest fruits of the kingdom of the Father. This is the reality of the new birth. This is the true resurrection. This is the redemption of the body. This is regeneration. The way thither is only through faith and deeds. Faith must be founded upon knowledge, and after knowledge arises service. Fasting is one of the deeds. The fast of the soul is the first and greater one to keep, and then the others follow. 1900 years ago, our great Master Jesus Christ walked the earth in the station of perfect radiance. He found only a few illiterate fishermen who were able to comprehend that radiance, and to them he taught the mysteries of the kingdom, giving them to drink of the pure wine from that heavenly kingdom, feeding them with the very body and blood of its sacred secrets, that, even as he was its vine, they might become its branches, that even as he was the sun of the new heavens of the Christian dispensation, they might become its moon and stars. And then he passed out of the world, leaving it in the same general clouds of spiritual darkness as prevailed when he came into it. And he left the trust of his holy mission and teachings in their hands. And today that little band of simple, unlearned men and women shine down through the centuries as the moon and stars. Peter the Rock was the moon of that heaven, for he established the Church of Christ. And Christ said, "I will come again in the clouds of spiritual darkness as I go." St. Matthew 26:29, St. John 16, verses 22 and 23, Acts 1:11. The clouds also signify the veil of flesh, the body, and a new dawning point of the light. That there are many signs which foretoken the near arising of the sun upon our spiritual night, very few who are at all thoughtful or reasoning will deny. The question as to how that deliverer is to appear is also absorbing the thought of many, and out of these many thoughts is crystallizing one predominating belief. Since Jesus Christ said the coming of the Son of Man would be as silently as a thief, St. Matthew 24:43, and unobserved, St. Luke 17:20, it is impossible that there should be any material pomp or demonstration. We are told by Jesus that the sun of the former spiritual heavens will darken, and that the light of its moon and stars will fall. Also it is prophesied that at this time the heavens will be rolled together as a scroll, and the elements will melt with fervent heat. What is this fire? We find the answer in Hebrews 12:29, for our God is a consuming fire. The end of the world, in the original Greek, is the conclusion of the age. It means that a definite cycle or period is perfected, and at its close, the day when God shall reign will arise. The deliverer of the earth will be seen and known, for he is to come and dwell with his people, and they, the flock of his pasture, are men, and he is to be their shepherd and their God. Ezekiel 34th chapter, from 23rd verse to end. Some may say that this refers to Jesus Christ. Was his appearance the time in which the covenant of universal peace was fulfilled? It is quite true that through the spiritual upliftment of his presence and teachings, he gave the secret of his abiding peace to his disciples. But he said, I came not to send peace, but a sword. Also, in his great parable of the Lord of the vineyard, Jesus Christ renews this prophecy, as found in St. Mark 12th chapter, 4 parties there being mentioned, 2 of which are the Father and the Son. In Zechariah we have many important prophecies concerning this time, and in its last chapter, verse 9, the declaration is made that the Lord shall be king over all the earth. In that day shall there be one Lord, and his name one. The prophetic utterances of the Psalms give us many proofs. It is said that the 2nd and the 72nd Psalms were never fulfilled. These announce that the king and the king's son are to come. Isaiah tells us, 30:20, that thine eyes shall see thy teachers. Prophecy always declares that this is to be the time of judgment, of sifting the nations. 1 Chronicles 16:33, Acts 17:30-31, Isaiah 30:28, Amos 9:9, etc., of separating the wheat from the tares, and of restoration and restitution. Acts 3:21. Clearly, there can be nothing to be restored in the supreme heavens. Therefore the promised one must appear upon the earth, be visible to all, and in a manner that it may be possible for all to know him, and to receive of him. God himself has been teaching us to recognize the perfection of his laws, which laws man alone has abused. In reason, the deliverer can only come to us in one way, born of a woman, born under the law, a chosen one whom God will send, and in whom the divine word will incarnate, and, by its manifestation, thus upon earth restore all things and renew the heavens and the earth and all that therein is. Jesus Christ also warns us against the false Christs which are rising upon all sides. This alone is sufficient proof that God will manifest himself in the flesh at the end of the age. Through every revelator the same light shines, through each the same word, whose goings forth have been from of old, from everlasting manifests. The personality, Jesus tells us, is nothing. The personality is but the pure and polished mirror, which, chosen of God, prepared of God, and sent by God, appears among mankind, and this mirror receives the bounty of his light, and reflects it out unto mankind. This was the light of Moses, and this was the light of Jesus. But in the advance of revelation, the light of Jesus was much greater. This light in every age is the reality of the messenger sent of God. The Word, which speaks through that personality, is that revelation through which we come into a knowledge of our God. This is the incarnated Word. The personality and the garment of another name are physical. The power of the Word, manifested in and bringing the light through that personality, is our means of communication with God. In the 3rd and 4th chapters of the book of Malachi, we also find that a forerunner is to appear, declaring the near approach of this day, and preparing the way of the Lord. The spirit and power of Elijah were manifested in John the Baptist, yet in the 1st chapter of the Gospel, according to St. John, he declared, I am not he. The prophecies regarding the coming of this herald, as found in Malachi, identify it with this time of sifting and of judgment. It is to be the time of the refining fire. It is the day in which God shall appear. Perfection shall reign and shall judge the earth. Who is this who is to arise in the midst of spiritual night? Malachi declares it is to be the Son of Righteousness. Whom did Jesus say this was? He said, I will return in the kingdom of my Father. Whose message did Jesus bring? The message of his Father. When they besought him at Capernaum not to depart from them, he said, I must preach the kingdom of God to other cities also, for therefore am I sent. St. Luke 4:42-43. He was sent to preach the coming of the Father's kingdom, not of his own kingdom, to announce the advent of the Lord of the vineyard. He taught his little band of disciples to pray for the coming of that kingdom. We find that Jesus often prayed to the Father. It is very true that he said, I and my Father are one. Jesus Christ was a mirror in which the light of the sun shone, and which reflected that light, and by this union and communion they were one. This is why he said, I am in the Father, and the Father in me, and also, he who hath seen the Son hath seen the Father. If a bar of iron is heated in the fire, it will become characterized with the characteristics of the fire. It is in the fire, and the fire is in it. Jesus also said, My Father is greater than I. St. John 14:28. Likewise he said, St. Luke 18:19, Why callest thou me good? None is good save one, that is God. He said, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. St. Mark 12:29. Jesus told his disciples that he did nothing of himself, but the Father dwelling in him did the works. St. John 14:10. That if the disciples had faith, they could do even greater works than he did. St. Matthew 21:21, etc. He said the word which they heard was not his, but the Father's. He talked only of the Father, of the coming of whose glorious day he was the faithful witness. He proclaimed to all that this was to be the dispensation of the fatherhood of God. In his last sublime hours he said that he was not alone, because the Father was with him. St. John 16:32. Certain of his last words were, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? And yet he expected to go to the Father. The record of him, as a man approved of God among you, through many mighty works which God did by him, which are the words of St. Peter, spoken on the day of Pentecost, and those of St. Paul in Hebrews, concerning the beloved, which tell us that the captain of our salvation was made perfect through suffering, do not in the slightest degree impair the power and majesty of this wonderful messenger sent by the Father. They who wrote these records of his life gladly walked in his lowly but glorious footsteps, even unto martyrdom, his foes being their foes, as St. Paul chronicles in 1 Thessalonians 2:15, who both killed the Lord Jesus and their own prophets, and have persecuted us. Jesus Christ was the Word of God, the Son of God, the mystery of God. His utterances have founded the Christian dispensation, and for 1900 years have been the light of the Occident. But if we believe in this light, we must believe in his prophecies. Clinching the words of Christ, we further find who is to come, and where, in the 9th chapter of Isaiah and the 6th verse. Unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. He is to come in the flesh. The government, a spiritual government, is to be upon his shoulder. His name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God. Did Jesus claim this? The Everlasting Father. Did Jesus say, I am the Father? Or that my Father is greater than I, and I go unto him? The Prince of Peace. 1900 years ago was not the dawn of universal peace. Today the world is looking for this glorious culmination of the ages, wherein mercy and truth shall meet together, righteousness and peace shall kiss each other. Psalm 85:10. In the first 2 verses of the 9th chapter of Isaiah, we find a prophecy concerning the people of the lands of Zebulun and Naphtali, by the way of the sea, beyond Jordan, in Galilee of the nations. And upon them is to shine a great light. This is the light of the mighty God, the everlasting Father, who is to come. Bethlehem, Nazareth, Jerusalem are not by any sea. Nazareth, the most northerly of the 3 localities, is 21 miles southeast of the city of Acre on the Mediterranean Sea, and some miles west of the little Sea of Galilee, which is a small inland lake, 13 miles in length. In the earliest ages of Christianity, Nazareth was quite overlooked by the Church. It did not contain a single Christian resident before the time of Constantine, and the first Christian pilgrimage to it took place in the 6th century. Also, the region where the light is located is beyond Jordan. Galilee too, a Hebrew word signifying a circle or a circuit, was originally applied, Joshua 27, to a small district belonging to the Jewish tribe of Naphtali. But biblical history informs us that at the time of the appearance of Jesus Christ, the term Galilee embraced the whole northern portion of Palestine, from the Mediterranean Sea to the river Jordan. There are 2 Bethlehems laid down in some of the biblical maps of Palestine. One has to do with the time of the early kingdoms of Judah and Israel. This Bethlehem is the most northerly one, and its location is about as far west from Nazareth as Nazareth is west of the Sea of Galilee. But the birthplace of Jesus Christ was Bethlehem of Judea. It was in the territory of Judah, or Judea, and was located several miles south of Jerusalem, and, as is Jerusalem also, some miles inland and west of the Dead Sea. Judea was the name of the 3rd district of Palestine. It was south of the district of Samaria. This is the Judea over which Herod the Great reigned when the star arose in his territory. Occasionally, the name Judea was applied to the whole of Palestine. The pathway of Jesus touched but briefly upon the northern Mediterranean coast, the traces of his holy footsteps being principally inland. His was not the time of judgment or of establishing justice. Isaiah 9:7. Many prophets did prepare the way for his coming, and he prepared the way for the coming of his Father. In Revelation 21st chapter, which is the revelation of Jesus which he gave to St. John, we find who is to come. There shall be a new heaven and a new earth, the new spiritual conditions. The new spiritual Jerusalem is to descend as a bride out of heaven, and, verse 3, God himself is to dwell with his people and be their God. In the same chapter, too, who are to be the light and the temple are promised, God and the Lamb. Jeremiah says, 30:21, of this holy age, their nobles shall be of themselves, and their governor shall proceed from the midst of them. Or, as the Revised Version, which brings out these great truths so clearly, records, their prince shall be of themselves, and their ruler shall proceed from the midst of them. In Titus 2:13 we find the appearance of the great God and our Saviour Jesus Christ are to be looked for. As late as the middle of the 4th century, the purity of this knowledge had been preserved, and was witnessed to by the Nicene Council. We are told that David delivered to his son the building of a temple to be reared without the sound of a hammer, and we know that no earthly temple can be so reared. There is more than a finite ancient order of symbolism in this. The covenant of God is renewed in his sacred books. Throughout the ages, every prophet has foretold the signs and redeclared God's promises concerning this great day. The Bible itself was written for it. Out of the many signs foreshadowing the approach of this period, it is difficult in one lesson to select a few to present. St. Paul said, "Judge nothing before the time until the Lord come, who both will bring to light the hidden things of darkness, and will make manifest the counsels of the hearts." 1 Corinthians 4:5. Jesus Christ has also declared that nothing that was hidden but should be manifested. St. Mark 4:22. Have we not this? In St. James, the 5th chapter, first 8 verses, and 2 Timothy, the 3rd chapter, first 5 verses, we have many things recorded concerning these conditions, when men shall be lovers of themselves instead of lovers of God, and having only a form of godliness. Also, in 1 Timothy 4th chapter, and first 5 verses, many are to depart from the faith and announce new doctrines and beliefs. We find the same in 3rd chapter of Zephaniah, and God's promise to all those who in that day believe in his appearing. In Micah 3:11 and in other places, those who dishonor God by taking money in exchange for teachings of him are warned as to what the result of this corruption will be. Did Christ or his disciples teach for money? Was their hire a thing of dollars? Ye have made my father's house a house of merchandise. Ho, every one that thirsteth, come ye to the waters, and he that hath no money, come ye, buy and eat. Yea, come, buy wine and milk without money, and without price. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, saith the Lord. Isaiah 55:1 and 8. In Zechariah 8:10 we have 3 foretokens: no hire for man, nor any for beast, nor any peace to him that went out and came in because of the affliction. For I set all men every one against his neighbour. In Joel 2:28-29 we have the promise of a great psychic quickening, and we hear of many who, ignorant of its sacredness, are corrupting it in various ways. In Daniel 12:4 knowledge shall be increased, knowledge through all awakened channels, knowledge of sciences, philosophy, arts, etc., knowledge of ourselves and knowledge of our God. Let us go to St. Matthew 24th chapter and the 21st chapter of St. Luke. If we read these with godlike eyes and ears, we need look no further, for Jesus herein took up the signs given by the prophets throughout the cycle of prophethood, which would, they declared, announce the dawn of the great day of God, and he himself reiterated them. False Christs are to abound, wars and rumours of wars, kingdom rising against kingdom, famine, plague, pestilence, and great tribulation. All of these are both material and spiritual. One great sign Jesus gave, that of the abomination of desolation standing in the holy place, and he referred to Daniel, who has predicted this in his 12th chapter. And then we find this abomination of desolation to be the complete degradation of the Jews, of which the rising of Muhammad was the symbol, and this is all fulfilled in their completed downfall and scattering. Now, knowing the signs of their deliverance are upon the earth, they are gathering home to the city of Jerusalem. The generation of which Christ speaks is a spiritual one, and refers to the creation or generation of his dispensation. St. Matthew 24:34. God said, "The sword of the Lord is filled with blood." Isaiah 34:6. Why? Because many shall doubt and shall curse the light, shall blaspheme, shall revile its appearance. There will be much opposition, persecution, and martyrdom. These will be the days of tribulation, through which the robes of God's own beloved will be made white. It has happened in the founding of every dispensation, but in this time there will be such a time of trouble as never before was known in the world, because this is to be the universal truth, and therefore all religions will oppose it. Distress and great affliction will be the portion of each and all, and these things will come to warn the peoples of the earth that unless they believe in him when he comes, the Spirit will be taken from them, and they will become as lamps without lights. To the unbeliever it will be a time of agony, to the believer a time of purification. The shadow of these things is upon the earth. In Amos 8:11 we find a great prophecy. Behold, the days come, saith the Lord God, that I will send a famine in the land, not a famine of bread, nor a thirst for water, but of hearing the words of the Lord. But listen to God's promise in Joel 3:18. And it shall come to pass in that day, that the mountains shall drop down new wine, and the hills shall flow with milk, and all the rivers of Judah shall flow with waters, and a fountain shall come forth of the house of the Lord, and shall water the valley of Shittim. 3 are to come: the herald who will prepare the way of God by opening the hearts of the people, that they may believe in him when he comes, the promised one himself, and his glorious Son and heir. This is the dawn of the 7th great creational day. A new generation is to appear. When the throes of a world's spiritual birth are at their height, one will arise as its great deliverer, and then will be born the era of the most great peace, and we shall be led out of the land of captivity and into the land of freedom. In that glad hour there shall be but one fold, one shepherd, one Lord upon the earth, and his name one. End of Lesson 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This recording by Nicholas James Bridgewater. Lesson 2 of the Revelation of Baha-ullah in a sequence of 4 lessons. Lesson 2. The Bab. When religion goes down and irreligion prevails, I take my birth to establish it again. Sometimes mankind does not realize this until after the light has shone and departed. Such was the case 1900 years ago. Within the past 60 years, a trinity of revelators has appeared upon the earth. These are the promised ones of God. There has been the proclaimer of the coming of truth, the Bab, the revelator of all truth, Baha-ullah, the deliverer of all truth, Abdul-Baha. The Bab was a young merchant, born in Shiraz, Persia, a descendant of Muhammad. He bore, very early in life, the marks of a supernatural power, which attracted and impressed all who came in contact with him. It was the early dawn of the light, but the darkness comprehended it not. The word Bab is Arabic, and means the gate. In May 1844, which corresponds with our times and a half a time, in the last chapter of the prophetic book of Daniel, he declared his mission and delivered his message. His mission was that of a forerunner and herald. His message was the announcement of the coming of the Perfect One, who, although upon earth, was yet veiled to mortal vision, by whose will he moved, and to the bond of whose love he clung, craving only that his life might be accepted of him as a sacrifice. The utterances of the Bab, although so youthful and so uneducated, moved all hearts, and many believed on his words. The Mohammedans arose to destroy his influence, and persecution of himself and his followers began to appear on all sides. The divines and scholars, by both collective and individual effort, endeavoured to quench this fire, but all efforts were as nothing in its presence. Many learned ones sought him for the purpose of pure investigation, and surrendered to the proofs of his claims. One said, "The season of spring and wine has arrived," and "Search after knowledge after reaching the known is culpable." This man of note, Mullah Muhammad Ali, went forth from the presence of the Bab, proclaiming from the pulpit his newly found joy, advising all to drink from the cup of clear water, and wrote his own confession of faith and allegiance to the Bab, and then himself became a target for the malign arrows of Muslim hostility. So powerful became the message of the Bab, so great the results appearing from his words, that grievous persecution, plot and intrigue arose against him and his rapidly augmenting band of believers. But all fell harmless and abortive, and finally the divines, instead of seeking to investigate his claims, began to avoid him. In pulpit and in private they declared the Bab an injurer to religion and state. The Muslims combined and resorted to arms against him and his faithful ones, who rallied together upon the defensive. Although the Babis were feeble in number, starved in body under the long siege of cruelties successively uprising against them, and an army of living skeletons, yet they used to meet their besiegers, fresh from a preparatory night of worship, reading and intoning the sacred texts of the new dispensation with sweet and strange utterances, and antiphonally chanting in perfect music, both spiritually and physically, their new Alleluia, Allahu Abha. Under the power of this exaltation of soul, on the following day they would meet the enemy and conquer. Finally, reduced to a state of siege, through a dastardly intrigue of the Mohammedans, they were drawn into a so-called truce, and when entirely unarmed, half famished and faint, with food placed before them to add to their torture, their treacherous adversaries fell upon them and massacred the majority of them. Even thus they gained their wish, which was to die in the path of their beloved. Such was their unfaltering trust in God. Scores of such incidents are chronicled. Finally, after many dire experiences, such influence was brought to bear upon the authorities that this greatest of heralds, this undaunted and buoyant spirit, the Bab, as the source of all this disturbance, was imprisoned for 9 months in the castle of Maku, which was situated upon an almost inaccessible mountain summit. But even there God took care of him and raised up friends in some of his attendants. From thence he was removed to the castle of Cherik. Need I state that notwithstanding this rigour of persecution, and even although under the close personal guard of his implacable enemies, the light which he brought could not be confined, but spread incessantly, and his believers increased in numbers and in steadfastness, neither hunger nor thirst nor stripes nor imprisonment, nor anything, even unto death, produced any effect upon them. Throughout Persia the might of the Bab's declaration absorbed all thoughts, and the Bab, lifted above all the tumult by the light within his soul, restricted himself in his prison cell to repeating his great message concerning and meditating upon the One of whose coming he was the honoured herald. This is one of his meditations: Though the ocean of woe rageth on every side, and the bolts of fate follow in quick succession, and the darkness of grief and affliction invades soul and body, yet is my heart brightened by the remembrance of thy countenance, and my soul as a rose garden from the perfume of thy nature. Even while imprisoned, he was summoned before the government tribunal at Tabriz. In vain they tried to condemn him by his own words. Finally one doctor inflicted a brutal scourging upon him, and after this indignity, which he bore with meekness and non-resistance, a sublime proof of the greatness of his mission, they returned him to the prison castle of Cherik. The extraordinary increase in the number of his followers awoke the alarm of the Moslems, and later on Church and State clasped hands and held riot against the faith, combining by every method possible to be devised the uproot of the Babis. Some great personages about this time allied themselves with heart and soul to the cause, among whom was that gifted and beautiful woman Qurratul Ain, the daughter of a sage, and Mirza Muhammad Ali of Mazandaran. These new accessions arose to serve the faith with such power that naught could put them down. Great slaughters of the Babis followed. Countless cruelties, some too horrible to mention, were inflicted. Their defenceless homes were plundered. They were ambushed and shot down. Their bodies ripped open, exposing their vitals. They were burned with hot irons to a crisp. They were cut by many swords, and fell, bleeding at every pore. They were sawn asunder. After life had departed, their heads were cut off. Their bodies were hacked and trodden upon. But in the face of all the severest trials and torture, they bore aloft the banner of the faith with a devotion unparalleled in modern times. Joy supernal reigned in their souls, while all about them existed the reign of destruction. The Mohammedans are divided into two great branches, the Sunnites of Turkey and the Shiites of Persia, and these are subdivided into many sects. But no great disturbances had ever existed among them until the Bab arose and declared himself. When this occurred, the darkness became manifest through and opposed to the light, but that light shone clearer and ever yet more clear unto the end of this sublime life. It has been said of the Bab that his words so intoxicated his followers with the wine of divine love and wisdom that they forgot all beside, and earthly things became as nothing. The Bab was athirst for martyrdom in the cause of the great tidings which he had declared, and this cup, overflowing with the gift of God, was granted him. On the 8th of July, 1850, in the morning, he was suspended by ropes, and a regiment of soldiers ordered to fire upon him. None of the shots took effect, the slender ropes alone being cut, and when the smoke cleared away, he was found near by, unharmed. Again his enemies suspended him, and gave orders to the soldiers to fire. These, however, made their excuses, and another regiment was summoned, and their volleys liberated his victorious spirit, which passed to the beyond, and rested in the presence of God. Blessed is the body which is cut into pieces for the sake of faithfulness. 6 months before his departure, the Bab sent a sealed epistle to a disciple named Haji Suleiman Khan, instructing him to break the seal only when a grievous sorrow and affliction befell him. When the sacrifice of the Bab's life took place, and this disciple heard the report of the muskets, he knew that this was the event predicted, and broke the seal of the letter. The contents announced that 6 months from the date of writing the Bab would suffer martyrdom at Tabriz. The date fell exactly on that day. The letter also gave instructions as to the disposition of his body. The disciples went by night to the sentinels who stood guard over the body as it lay in the moat outside of the city walls, with the body of a follower who had determined to die with him, bribed these sentinels, and bore the bodies away. Shrouded in white silk and placed in a chest, they were later removed to Teheran, and in the recent past arrangements were made for a shrine and an interment elsewhere. Thus the Bab fulfilled his holy mission. Since revelation is progressive, the station of the herald is progressive, and the light which appeared through the Bab and gave its bounties unto all was a fitting dawn preceding the splendor so soon to envelop the world. The cycle of the Bab was the cycle wherein he trained and developed the people for the meeting of God, and therefore he called himself the Supreme Lord. After his departure, the fires of persecution were renewed, and thousands of his followers were massacred, and helpless women and little children were ruthlessly trodden down and destroyed. But the word, spoken through this great annunciator, kindled not only the heart of Persia, but spread to other parts of the world, and many, knowing the signs, came to seek its light, and to become confirmed in its great reality, and to bear to other lands its fragrance. The history of the cycle of the Bab is the history of blood. But as one has spoken of these martyrdoms, their blood and clay have formed the foundation stones of this heavenly temple, and verily we know that the foundations of this faith will never be destroyed. The Bab's first believer was Mullah Hussein of Bushrueh, a most eminent Far Eastern divine, who sought him for the purpose of investigation, and became so filled by the power of the utterances of the Bab that he went forth at once to proclaim his message. Thus he was called the Bab-ul-Bab, which means the gate of the gate. Also he was called the first letter of the living, there being 18 letters, or the first believers who gathered about the Bab. The Bab was the 19th. He was also the first point, meaning the point of revelation and of the creational book of God. He left many writings and proofs of the greatness of his mission, and one especial book of prophecy called Al-Bayan, the Exposition. The whole purport of his words and writings was to prove to the people that he was only a messenger of glad tidings of the coming of a greater one, through whose revelation universal peace would be established. It was to be the day of the reign of God. This message was his joy and comfort in the darkness of his prison. He said, I am a letter out of that most mighty book, a dewdrop from that limitless ocean, and when he shall appear, my true nature, my mysteries, riddles and intimations will become evident, and the embryo of this religion shall develop through all the grades of its being and ascent, attain the most comely of forms, and become adorned with the robe of blessed be God, the best of creators. He said, the whole Bayan revolves around the saying of him whom God shall manifest, and that the Bayan and such as are believers yearn more after him than the yearning of any lover after his beloved. Also, if one should hear a single verse from him and recite it, it is better than that he should recite the Bayan 1,000 times. The Bab likewise said, O remnant of God, I am wholly sacrificed unto thee. I am content with curses in thy way. I crave not but to be slain in thy love, and God the Supreme sufficeth as an eternal protection. The Bab fulfilled Muslim prophecy in being the return of the 12th Imam. He fulfilled Zoroastrian prophecy as the dawn of the new day, when 3 chosen ones should appear. The first of this trinity of manifestation was to be like the dawn. He fulfilled Israelitish prophecy as Elijah. The name Elijah has a spiritual significance, and is the symbol of the mission and message of the forerunner. It says, My God is Jehovah. The Bab fulfilled Christian prophecy as the angel, who, with the sound of a trumpet, would precede the coming of the Son of Man. The voice of the trumpet is the voice of the incarnated Word, which spoke through the Bab, and his cycle is the time of the first resurrection. Revelation 4:1. Resurrection is a spiritual awakening in this body of the dust, when the voice of the trumpet calls us, and we arise out of our graves to know God. Muhammad, 1300 years ago, declared of the Bab, that in him shall be the perfection of Moses, the preciousness of Jesus, and the patience of Job. His saints shall be abased in his time, and their heads exchanged as presents to their enemies. They shall be slain and burned, and shall be afraid and fearful and dismayed. The earth shall be dyed with their blood, and wailing shall prevail among their women. These are my saints indeed. The Bab never saw the one of whose coming he was the heavenly courtier and herald. His knowledge of him was all from God, but he said of him that no fire was more intense than the fire of turning away from him. It has been almost 60 years since the angel first sounded the trumpet call throughout the earth, and in response to it thousands of the elect have been gathering from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. The Bab's little day of between 5 and 6 wonderful years, as men count years, has passed, and his holy mission has ended, for the effulgence of the revelation of him whom God has manifested, Baha-ullah, today is illuminating the world. For he has come, the one who was covenanted has come, and he has declared to the nations and kingdoms of the earth, I am ready, the Father has come, 'tis day break everywhere. Letter from Akka Muhammad Ali of Tabriz, who suffered death with his master the Bab, written to his brother who desired him to recant. He is the compassionate. O thou who art my Qibla, my condition, thanks to God, has no fault, and to every difficulty succeedeth ease. You have written that this matter has no end. What matter then has any end? We at least have no discontent in this matter, nay, rather we are unable sufficiently to express our thanks for this favour. The end of this matter is, to be slain in the way of God, and oh, what happiness is this! The will of God will come to pass with regard to his servants. Neither can human plans avert the divine decree. What God wills comes to pass, and there is no power and no strength but in God. O thou who art my Qibla, the end of the world is death. Every soul tastes of death. If the appointed fate which God, mighty and glorious is he, hath decreed, overtake me, then God is the guardian of my family, and thou art mine executor. Behave in such wise as is pleasing to God, and pardon whatever has proceeded from me which may seem lacking in courtesy, or contrary to the respect due from juniors, and seek pardon for me from all those of my household, and commit me to God. God is my portion, and how good is he as a guardian. End of Lesson 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This recording by Nicholas James Bridgewater. Lesson 3 of the Revelation of Baha-ullah in a sequence of 4 lessons. Lesson 3, the Revelation of Baha-ullah. This is the simplest of messages, and therefore the greatest, for greatness is always characterized by simplicity. Truth is simplicity itself. The revelation of Baha-ullah is the revelation which rights all wrong, for it comes from the world which rights the wrongs of this one. Its mission is one of love and fragrance, of peace on earth, goodwill to men. It has appeared for the purpose of unifying and cementing together into one great family all the nations of the earth. Its followers must become the servants of all, and the cup-bearers of the divine knowledge unto all. They are messengers who are rewarded only by God, and then only so far as their service is pure in his sight. To serve humanity is to serve God. Its virtues are those revealed 1900 years ago by Jesus Christ. It is not a new faith, but faith renewed, not a new light, but light restored. It is truth, rescued from the scaffold, and placed upon its throne. Its one keynote is the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man. The sacred manuscript of the ages, the Bible, with the searchlight of this message turned upon its pages, is crowned with the all-illuminating beauty of God, and becomes our guide to this revelation. What is this revelation? In profane history, in magazine, in current literature, and in encyclopedia, it is variously represented and misrepresented, but in one of the newest books upon great religions of the world it has been included as one, and the latest religion. Because the Bab heralded this daybreak of splendour, those who are not clearly informed call it Babism. Whenever religion goes down, and irreligion prevails, God chooses one who shall come according to the laws of the flesh, and through whom he will manifest himself, to restore religion again, and thus to found what is called a new dispensation. Impossible to found a new dispensation without a new revelation and a new law. Whenever the divine word incarnates, it is known by its manifestation, and man understands and knows it only when spoken through one whom he sends. Also man understands that word only so far as his purity and sincerity permit. While God's Spirit never leaves the earth, and has always pervaded it since first, in the beginning, it brooded upon the waters, yet the Word at intervals manifests in a human temple to restore light and to establish a new heaven and earth. Revelation, as all in this age of intelligence fully realize, is progressive. The prophets were the simple messengers of God. That was the cycle of prophethood. Jesus Christ was the Son of God. His was the cycle of sonship. Muhammad was the seal of all prophetic revelation, whether through Israelitish prophet or through Jesus. Therefore Muhammad's was a special mission. This is the age of the fatherhood of God. Jesus Christ taught this progression in revelation in the parable of the Lord of the Vineyard. 4 parties are chronicled in this parable: the Lord of the Vineyard, the dishonest husband, the servants or prophets, the son of the Lord of the Vineyard. At the close of the cycle, the Lord of the Vineyard is himself to return and re-establish truth. The Lord of Hosts is his name. Muhammad's mission will be explained later. Suffice it to state that this is not a Mohammedan sect, for the Mohammedans are its chief persecutors. This fact speaks for itself. In the progress of revelation, the time has come when the signs of the dawn of a new dispensation are appearing upon the earth, when the times are being fulfilled. All hearts who hunger for the light are watching, with great earnestness, the rapid evolution of these signs, as laid down by the prophetic sacred books of the entire earth. The world is looking for the Promised One to bring new conditions and to restore that light. A day star has again appeared in the east. In its day thousands gathered out of every nation, religion, and rank in life, the sage, the scientist, the philosopher, and the babe in years, the learned and the ignorant, the Jew, Mohammedan, Christian, Buddhist, and Zoroastrian, the atheist and the agnostic, the Unitarian and the Trinitarian, all are walking, as little children in its light, worshipping and adoring the one true God. Is this a thing at which to scoff? Offences must come, but woe unto him by whom they come. Even scoffers fulfil prophecy. But for those whose spiritual ears are hearing the sound of the trumpet, which is the voice of the Spirit, whose spiritual eyes are enlightened to behold the beauty of this arisen day star, and to understand the brightness of its coming, whose spiritual nostrils are inhaling the holy fragrance from that white spot which is perfuming all regions, whose dry bones are being clothed anew by the recreative power of that word, unto these the feast is great and great. For the gates of the boundless kingdom are opened, night is turning into day, and the veil of ignorance is being removed from off the face of the earth. The Revelation of Baha-ullah covers half a century. In the year 1817, 2 years before the birth of the Bab, a son was born in Nur, near Tehran, Persia. Nur itself means light. He was of ancient royal lineage, a son of an ex-vizier. From his youth he was held in regard and honour by even the wise, and although uneducated, whenever he appeared in any assemblies where questions of divinity and points of metaphysics were being discussed by the learned and scholarly, those present would receive proofs of his discernment and wisdom so far beyond the natural limitation of the human race, that they were astonished at his utterances, He spoke as one having authority. As time passed, the influence of these utterances began so to pervade the minds of his hearers, that a great number, both of the wealthy and the lowly, the erudite and the ignorant, became enkindled and gave up all, to follow with joy his teachings. The wisest found themselves as nothing before him, and upon the other hand, even the little children understood and followed him, and towards these tender lambs of the fold he was most loving. The divines of the region of Nur sent 2 of their most distinguished representatives to him, to subdue by force of argument the fire of his words, but so did these words move their hearts, that they too abandoned altar, chair, preferment, wealth, and renown, and went out proclaiming the cause. As time passed on, thousands of the most spiritually illuminated, the most intellectually developed in reasoning, accepted his revelation, and thus were forged the first golden links in this chain of a faith now encircling the world. Like Abraham of old, he established in the process of time his holy household, type of the great household of humanity, whose keeper is the One, who, watching over Israel, slumbers not nor sleeps. Baha-ullah has unsealed the sacred manuscripts of the world, and has revealed many holy books which contain the mysteries of God. Yet, like Jesus of old, he was never educated, and like him he knew all things, and needed not that any man should teach him. To this bear witness the most learned of his countrymen. The hearts of the followers of that great herald the Bab, after his martyrdom, began to turn towards Baha-ullah. He was recognized by all as the centre, but not the declared centre. 9 years after the Bab had declared him to the world, Baha-ullah declared himself to a few of his disciples. The renewal of this light, and with more powerful manifestation than ever before, rekindled the fires of persecution to such an extent that under the pressure a few of the Babis, who were yet babes in the realities of non-resistance and meekness, and wearied with cruelty and injustice, plotted to take the life of the Shah, and this resulted in the open destruction of many of them. Baha-ullah, who, although able to dominate all law, yet because he was the burden-bearer for all, had become subject to all law, sought the summer court of the Shah, and gave himself up, to show how great was his horror and grief for such an act. But the Mohammedans, bitterly prejudiced through feeling, temperament, and religion against the Babis, confined this holy one in a dungeon in Teheran for months. He was chained together with a number of others, and in whatever movement one of them made, the remainder were compelled to participate, so that not only dungeon and chains, but also unrest was his portion. From thence he was exiled to Baghdad. In this exile, now begun, his fulfilled prophecy, for he was never subject to an earthly potentate. With his holy household he was removed thither, and for 11 years he remained in and around Baghdad. Baghdad is in Turkey, in Asia. Through it run the Euphrates and Tigris rivers. It is also a part of Mesopotamia. Behold, who is this that cometh from Edom with dyed garments from Bosra? This that is glorious is his apparel, travelling in the greatness of his strength. I that speak in righteousness, mighty to save. Isaiah 63:1. Edom and Bosra are significant words. The descendants of Ishmael and of Esau, as is well known, are Mohammedans. Obadiah will furnish you with light upon their future, and saviours are to appear. Verse 21. Of the 11 years which followed Baha'u'llah's exile to Baghdad, a greater portion were spent by him alone, among the Iraq mountains of that district, his holy family being in the town. These years were spent in meditation and in prayer. When his power became known in one place, he would remove to another. Through this time he lived like a hermit, on a little rice. When he was at Baghdad, the sheikhs of that place invited the sheikhs of Persia to meet with them and discuss some means by which they could face Baha-ullah and confound his words, which they all witnessed were like a rolling ocean, so that naught could withstand them. They decided to demand of him a miracle. One of the sheikhs was appointed to seek him and make the request of him. The sheikh entered his presence, and listening to his words, himself believed, and asked of Baha-ullah, "What shall I go and say to them?" Baha-ullah instructed him to tell them to select any miracle which they desired, and he would perform the same. He returned to them with the message, and also with the report of the wonderful wisdom of Baha-ullah's saying, "It is of God." The sheikhs began to discuss what miracle they would demand of him, and fell into disagreement, and the assembly broke up without sending him any further message, and this was the greatest miracle of all. The most learned of the sheikhs, and their authority upon all important points, met with them, but, when he learned the purport of their assembling, he refused to be a part of it, stating that he honoured Baha-ullah, and left them. He then wrote to Baha-ullah, asking his forgiveness, and also begging him to forgive those wolves who were persecuting him. At one time 1,000 Mohammedan divines came to argue with him, and he defeated them all. In the spring of 1863, Baha-ullah was removed from Baghdad to Constantinople, at which latter place he was treated with great respect, and where he remained 4 or 5 months. Before he left Baghdad, in 1863, 19 years after the Bab's declaration, he declared himself openly, sojourning for 12 days in a beautiful garden there, called Rezvan. By this most great Spirit's appearing, the whole world attains a new life. The whole material world is quickened through the birth of his human form, and the spiritual realms through his divine appearance, or spiritual manifestation. From this most great annunciation went forth the breezes which have vitalized the life of the universe. After the temporary sojourn in Constantinople, again the government exiled him to Adrianople, which lies in Turkey and Europe, inland and northwest of Constantinople. This removal occurred during the latter part of the same year of 1863, and at that time, and there again, this blessed one declared to the earth that he was its promised deliverer. From that spot between the year 1863 and 1869 he continued his great work of founding the new day, the sun of which, amid bloodshed and martyrdom, was arising upon the world. He sent to all the rulers and great ones of the earth the announcement of his perfect presence, declaring that for the sake of his eternal love to his creatures he had turned his footsteps from the invisible to the visible world, and veiled his splendour in the body of the dust, and that the way into the open gates of the kingdom of God was prepared for whosoever would walk therein. The prophecy of this great invitation is found in St. Luke, 14th chapter, beginning with the 16th verse. And they all began with one consent to make excuse. These tablets, revealed at this time, are now matters of history. He sent these tablets to the Tsar, to the Pope, to the Emperor of Germany, to Napoleon III of France, to England's Queen, and to others. Upon reading the tablet revealed to her, Queen Victoria said, "If this is of God, it will stand, and if not, there is no harm done." The Tsar sent one of his nobility to investigate the source of the tablet received by him, and this messenger returned with such impressive accounts of his mission that the Tsar became stirred with visions of the most great peace. The Pope received the message with scorn, and a second tablet was sent, warning him that because of his act his temporal power would soon be taken from him. In 1870 the Franco-German War broke out. The French troops were withdrawn from Rome. King Emmanuel walked in with his soldiers and made the Pope a virtual prisoner in the Vatican. Frederick III, then Crown Prince of Germany, during a pilgrimage to Syria, ignored Acre, the holy city, and the great invitation, and for this he was warned in a message from Baha-ullah that he should never rule his country. He was crowned on his sick bed and died 3 months later, without having actually ruled Germany a single day. Baha-ullah revealed in a tablet to this sovereign the following concerning his empire: O banks of the river Rhine, we have seen ye drenched in gore, because the swords of retribution were drawn against ye, and ye shall have another trouble. And we hear the lamentation of Berlin, though it be today in manifest glory. He revealed to a prominent Turk named Rais the following tablet: The land of mystery, Adrianople, and what is beside it will be changed, and shall pass out of the hands of Turkey, and commotion shall appear, and lamentations shall arise, and trouble shall become manifest on all sides. He also uttered the following judgment upon Turkey: personified in Constantinople. O point, which liest on the shore of two seas, the throne of injustice hath been fixed in thee. Thou shalt perish, and those people that are within thee shall lament. The messengers who conveyed the tablet to Egypt were made prisoners and sent into exile, and the tablet was ignored. Baha-ullah predicted the downfall of the Khedive, Ismail Pasha, and that these messengers in a short while would be released and would stand in the presence of their beloved master. General Gordon soon after, in his political campaign in Egypt, released those men and gave them permission to return home, and the events connected with the downfall of the Khedive at this time are the property of history. Napoleon III read the tablet addressed to him and threw it away, saying, "If he is God, I am two gods." Baha-ullah addressed to him a second tablet containing the following: "Because of what thou hast done, affairs shall be changed in thy kingdom, and thy empire shall depart from thine hands as a punishment for thine actions. Then shalt thou find thyself in manifest loss, and commotion shall seize the people there, unless thou arisest to assist in this matter, and followest the Spirit in this straight way. Thy glory hath made thee proud. By my life, verily it shall not endure, but shall pass away, unless thou takest hold of this firm rope. We have seen humiliation hastening after thee, while thou art of those that sleep." That tablet is a sufficient proof. It was revealed when Napoleon was so powerful that he said, "On this globe I am the one God." In such a time was this tablet written. The world knows the downfall of Napoleon III, of his dethronement, his exile, and his death. Baha-ullah sent a tablet to the Shah of Persia at a later period from Acre. A youth bore it, travelling on foot to Teheran, and gave it to the Shah as the latter rode through the streets. He gave it, not as a petition, but as a command sent to him, saying, "A command from one whose authority is higher than yours." The Shah learned the authorship and contents of the letter, but the young messenger, Badi, the Wonderful, was branded to death with red-hot bricks. When the executioners were lifting these red-hot bricks with iron tongs to put them upon his body, he declared that he welcomed this martyrdom, and seized them with his own hands, and applied them to his bosom. This youth, knowing that his life might thus be sacrificed, had sought the privilege of being the bearer of this tablet from the Beloved. Teheran, Baha-ullah blessed and promised that justice should reign therein. During the close of 1868, the Perfect One was exiled from Adrianople to Acre, and there placed under the most great imprisonment for 9 years, 2 of these being in the prison proper in that city, and 7 under close guard in another building. While he was under this confinement, pilgrims from Persia and India would walk from their native towns and provinces to see him, these pilgrimages sometimes covering 6 and 7 months, and under all the vicissitudes of weather, and arriving footsore and weary, would linger outside of those prison walls until they received just one look from their beloved from the window of his cell, and then returned home, their hearts forever refreshed by that light. Baha-ullah said that even though they confined him in a dungeon, they would find him riding upon the clouds of heaven, and so it was. In being the cupbearer of this great message, that cup is so filled with gems that there is an embarrassment in selecting what first to share. After realization of its priceless contents once takes possession of the soul of man, that soul becomes athirst to renew the cup forever and ever. As to miracles from this holy source, there are no limits, and they are greater than any that ever before existed. But these are never the highest or the most conclusive evidence. They are only a demonstration for those who witness them. The penetration and power of the Word to change the heart of man, turning it to God to such a degree as to render it indifferent to all lesser attractions, is the unanswerable proof. The Mohammedans once cursed the Christians, but through this revelation they have learned to revere and honour Jesus Christ as the Son of God, and understand and believe our Bible quite as well as we do, and are able to teach this truth from its pages. And now one word about Muhammad's mission. His manifestation and prophetic utterances had prepared the way for the coming of the one in whom is perfection, Baha-ullah, and by Muhammad's texts alone Do his followers believe this great and holy reality, and then learn to look upon the inhabitants of the world as their brethren. The Father's name is written in the forehead of every Mohammedan who believes in the reality of Muhammad's teachings, and who thus forsakes its present corruptions, and declares for the light of God, as manifested in this great day. Was Muhammad's mission for naught? And this light of God, shining for all the world, is the only light which will lift the Orient out of mortal degradation and spiritual ignorance, and rescue it from eternal loss. After Baha-ullah with his holy household endured for 9 years the extremes of hardship and persecution in the prison of Acre, and when they could find no fault in him, by the power of God the guarding doors were thrown open, and once more he was but an exile. For 14 years he abode in the suburbs of Acre. Acre is a Turkish prison city on the east coast of Syria, and used for the incarceration of convicts. Those representatives who, by command of the Sultan and the Shah, met to consult as how this mysterious power in their midst could be curbed, decided that, owing to its unhygienic conditions, this place would soon end his life. Those representatives, by whose word he was brought there, themselves died in a few months. And for him the desert blossomed as the rose. Thus he laid the glorious foundations of the faith. In his 40 years' manifestation and wanderings, or thereabout, 19 years ere his departure, he revealed a New Testament declaring his son Abbas Effendi to be his successor, and then, amid the heartbreak of his followers, he left the temple of the body and ascended to the heaven from whence he came. His is the trust of delivering that revelation to the earth, and of building the temple of the New Jerusalem. In the presence of this exaltation of the fulfilled covenant in manifestation, the world is asleep. Just so it was 1900 years ago. God's messenger then was slandered and abused, and his foes were those of his own household, for his own received him not, and so it will be in these days. But now as then, my sheep hear my voice. The station of this day is beyond all that which hath ever preceded it, therefore know its greatness. Surely he hath shone forth from the Orient, and his signs have appeared in the Occident. Awake, by the breezes of God! Verily they have blown in the world. Blessed is whoever hath found their fragrance, and is of the assured. It is for each one to investigate this truth. For the sake of your soul, beware how you oppose it. There is no middle ground. The responsibility rests upon the possessor of this divine knowledge, until he offers it to others, and then the responsibility rests upon those to whom it is offered. Prayer will show you the truth. This is the truth. The Beloved hath gone down into the garden to gather lilies. End of Lesson 3. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. If you would like more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This recording by Nicholas James Bridgewater. Lesson 4 of the Revelation of Baha-ullah in a sequence of 4 lessons. Lesson 4: Proofs of the Revelation of Baha-ullah. The Bible is threefold in the character of its contents. First, its books of history. Second, its records of laws and ordinances. Third, its books of prophecy. It is with the third division of its contents that we have principally to do in this period of their fulfilment. Let us first turn to its earlier register. In Genesis 15:5, God promised a great posterity to Abraham. Abraham had 2 sons, his firstborn Ishmael being the son of Hagar, whom the angel of the Lord, Genesis 16:12, declared would be a wild man, and his hand against every man, and every man's hand against him, and that he should dwell in the presence of all his brethren. And Genesis 17:20, God promised that 12 princes and a great nation should be born from him. With Isaac, the second son, a covenant was to be established, Genesis 17:21, which promise was later fulfilled, Genesis 26:3-5. Through the influence of Sarah, Isaac's mother, Ishmael and Hagar became outcasts from their home, and these wanderers turned their footsteps to the wilderness of Paran, where they dwelt, and where Ishmael married an Egyptian wife. It says in Genesis 21:20 that God was with the lad. Both biblical and profane historians coincide in the belief that that great nation promised to Ishmael is that of Arabia, for his descendants people the northern and western parts of that country, and eventually form the chief element of the Arabian nation. See also Genesis 15:18. The history of Abraham's second son, Isaac, who married Rebekah, is well known. He had 2 sons, Esau and Jacob. Through duplicity, Jacob secured both Esau's birthright and blessing. Yet Isaac bestowed the following benediction upon Esau, as found in Genesis 27:39-40. Behold, thy dwelling shall be the fatness of the earth, and of the dew of heaven from above, and by thy sword shalt thou live, and shalt serve thy brother, and it shall come to pass, when thou shalt have the dominion. Revised version, break loose, that thou shalt break his yoke from off thy neck. Esau married a daughter of Ishmael, Genesis 28:9, and dwelt in Mount Seir. Esau is Edom, Genesis 36:8. Edom is a portion of northwestern Arabia and adjoining Syria. In the 17th century it was overcome by the Arabs and has since shared the fortunes of Arabia. Its capital was Bosra. The Greek form of Edom is Idumea. The maps identify Mount Seir with Edom. Biblical commentators have repeatedly asserted that Esau also was a thorough Bedouin and son of the desert. Unto Isaac was born Jacob, and unto Jacob was born 12 sons, out of whom were to come, not one nation, as promised to Ishmael, but many nations and kings. These sons were the heads of the 12 tribes of Israel. From both Ishmael and Isaac there were therefore to be brought forth 12 promised great descendants. From the tribe of Judah, by lineal descent, David the king was born, and later, also by lineal descent, from him was born Mathat, who according to biblical history was the common grandfather of Joseph and Mary. The genealogical records found in St. Matthew and St. Luke pertaining to the ancestry of Jesus Christ are not in harmony, but the 3 mentioned facts remain uncorrupted. Jesus Christ was to be of the seed of David, and his kinsman according to the flesh, and as such he was recognized, as we find recorded in Romans 1:3. But we find that David has also a spiritual significance, for in the 110th Psalm we read a statement made by the king concerning it. And when the Pharisees declared to Jesus in St. Matthew 22nd chapter that Christ was the son of David, Jesus himself makes the following reply, quoting King David's own words from the psalm referred to. How then doth David in spirit call him Lord, saying, The Lord said unto my Lord, Sit thou on my right hand, till I make thine enemies thy footstool. If David then call him Lord, how is he his son? And no man was able to answer him a word, neither durst any man from that day forth ask him any more questions. David spiritually means the beloved, and is therefore a symbol of divine love. In Genesis 49:10 we have a prophecy of Jacob's, as he blessed his 12 sons. He said, The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh come, and unto him shall the gathering of the people be. This has been said to refer to Jesus Christ, but Jesus came out of Judah, and the Star of Bethlehem did not abrogate, but perfected the glory of Judah. Only a fragment of the people gathered to him. For 1900 years the world has paid homage to the scepter of the Lion of the tribe of Judah. When the days are fulfilled, it will depart. Genesis 49:1. And now Shiloh hath come, and all nations are flowing unto him. Isaiah, as already quoted, accurately locates the place from which this light shall shine unto the world, by the way of the sea, out of the rose garden of Acre. In the 2nd chapter of Daniel we find that King Nebuchadnezzar had a dream of an image which is formed of 4 different metals, the head of gold, the breast and arms of silver, the belly and thighs of brass, the legs of iron, the feet part of iron and part of clay. Daniel, to whom God gave the interpretation of this dream, explained it as follows. Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom, at that period was in a condition of strength and power, and this was typified by the head of gold. An inferior condition of the kingdom was to follow, symbolized by the silver, a third one of brass, and bearing extensive rule, a fourth one of iron. It is especially in connection with the end and subdivision of this fourth condition that a certain great event is promised. This age of the kingdom is to be of iron, which will have the power of subjugation and of destruction. It is to be divided into two limbs. At the very end of its existence it will break away into many divisions, and these will be part of iron and part of clay. It is a human kingdom, for they are not to mingle with mankind, but shall not cleave to one another, or amalgamate. For although they are the outgrowth of preceding conditions, yet they are opposed to each other. At this period a stone cut out without hands will smite the image upon his feet, and will destroy every remnant of its present and its former conditions. They are to be as the chaff before the wind, and the stone which destroyed them is to be the kingdom which the God of heaven shall set up, and which shall stand for ever. The Mohammedan religion combines church and state, and governs both. It has long been divided into two branches, the Shiites of Persia and the Sunnites of Turkey. In the latter days they have subdivided into many sects, and although they are all one in believing in Mohammed as their prophet, yet they will not intermarry or intermingle with one another. This Mohammedan religion forms the limbs and feet of the image. The Shiites are more spiritual than the Sunnites, and therefore are stronger in the eyes of God. The stone is the everlasting kingdom of Baha-ullah. God has founded this kingdom. Jesus Christ, in St. Matthew 24:15, warns us that the closing events of his dispensation will come to pass when the abomination of desolation shall be perfected. This refers to the completion of the degradation and scattering of the Jews, which has attained its culmination, and by the signs of their Torah they know that their day of desolation has ended, and for them the gates of the kingdom have opened. Mohammed declared himself 10 years prior to the establishment of Mohammedan time, which began 622 AD. Mohammedan and Jewish years are each lunar, and are each 354 days in length. The Jewish year contains 6 months of 30 days and 6 months of 29 days. If we turn to Daniel 12:11, we will find the prophecy to which Jesus referred when he gave us the signs of the end of the days, at which time his scepter as the Judean lawgiver would depart, and one would appear whose scepter adorned with the jewels of love, peace and concord would dominate the world. In this 11th verse of 12th chapter of Daniel it speaks of the destruction of the daily sacrifice and the appearance of the abomination of desolation. In 70 AD Titus conquered Jerusalem, but at that time the daily sacrifice was not really destroyed, for although it was not celebrated in Jerusalem, yet the Jews continued to celebrate it secretly throughout all Syria, and this was never annulled until Mohammedanism invaded Jerusalem and banished the Jews from all Syria. The appearance of Mohammed was the symbolic fulfillment of this prophecy. In these 1,290 days we have 1,290 lunar years. That lunar time underlies all biblical calculation, is a fact so widely recognized as to require no proof. Ezekiel tells us that the days are appointed us for years, Ezekiel 4:6. If we take these 1,290 lunar years and multiply by 354 the number of days of the lunar year, we reduce them to lunar days, and then if we take 365 the number of the days of the solar year and divide this into the lunar days, we will thus reduce them to solar years. But the more rapid and entirely accurate method is to take 3 years from every 100, and the years proportionally from the fraction of 100, and this result to 622 AD, when Anno Hegira, or lunar time, was established, and we have 1873. Now Muhammad declared himself 10 years solar time prior to this, and if we subtract 10 years from 1873 we find 1863. This is the year in which the deliverer of the earth declared himself to all its peoples, the beginning of that year at Baghdad, and the latter part of the same year at Adrianople. The Bab's declaration took place in 1260 Anno Hegira. He fulfilled Mohammedan prophecy when he declared himself at that time. The Mohammedans in Persia, India, Algeria, Syria, all dreaded this year, as boding no good to them. It was a common remark in Egypt, that with that year the spirit of the Arab was gone. Let us examine the times appointed by Jesus Christ in the 12th chapter of Revelation. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, the emblem of Persia, and the moon, the emblem of Turkey, under her feet. This is the symbol of the Mohammedan religion. Upon her head is a crown of 12 stars. These are the 12 Imams who succeeded Muhammad. Many caliphs succeeded him, but only an occasional one was an Imam, or spiritual teacher. Muhammad's nephew Ali married the Prophet's daughter Fatima, and thus perpetuated the line. After the departure of the 12th Imam, which Arab theologians state was in 260 AH, 1,000 years were to elapse, and then the great Imam Mahdi would appear. The Mohammedan dispensation would fall, and God would reign on the earth. Thrice the trumpet would sound. The first trumpet was exactly fulfilled in Anno Hegira 1260, when the Bab arose and declared his wondrous message as the forerunner and herald of one greater than he. The child in Revelation 12th chapter, which was born of the woman, was Muhammad. The wilderness to which the woman flees in the 6th and 14th verses is the spiritual wilderness of Arabia, and all the world, if at all familiar with Oriental history, knows of the marvellous rise of the Mohammedan dispensation, and how for hundreds of years thereafter, in science, arts, and literature, Arabia led the Orient, and Ishmael's 12 princes became entirely fulfilled in the 12 Imams. God prepared for that religion a place where it should be nourished, 1,260 days, i.e., 1260 years. This is lunar time. Reduce it to solar time, as in the 1290 years. The result is 1222 years. The Bab declared himself 1260 years, lunar time, Anno Hegira, and the Anno Hegira began 622 AD solar time, and the 622 solar years to 1222 solar years, and the result is 844 solar years. Thus is fulfilled the appointed date in the 6th verse of the 12th chapter, Revelation. In the 14th verse of the same chapter, another date is set. Time, biblically, signifies 360 days, years, 2 times 720 days, a half a time 180 days. Add these all together, and you have again 1260, and this time is the same as the time times and a half appointed in Daniel 12:7. This 360 days is also lunar. Out of a more complicated system of computing time, Meton of Athens, who lived about 400 years before Christ, evolved this clear method. The following is the process by which it is reached. Every 19 years the moon completes a cycle, its new moon falling on the date of the new moon 19 years previously. It lacks but the very slightest fraction of the complete cycle of 19 years. The square of 19 is 361. As there is this slight fraction, the 1 year is dropped, making a cycle of 360 years. This cycle is the root and basis of all time reckoning, and underlies all biblical and astronomical calculations. It is the golden cycle of the ancients. Also, Revelation 11:2. Bring these months to lunar years. We have the 1260 lunar years, and in verse 3 again 1260 lunar years. These prophecies refer to the Mohammedan dispensation, and the 2 witnesses were Muhammad and Ali, for no other witnesses arose between the advent of Jesus Christ and the present time. In the book of Daniel we find another date recorded. Daniel was a state officer in the courts of 3 successive Babylonish kings. In the reign of Belshazzar, the time when the sanctuary shall be cleansed of the transgression is given in a vision to Daniel, as found in 8th chapter, verse 13 and 14. 2,300 biblical years are here stated. In round numbers, from this period in Daniel's life to the birth of Jesus Christ, there were 500 years, and from Jesus Christ's appearance until the beginning of last century, when the Son was born, there were 1800 years, making a total of 2300 years. There are also various methods which various Bible students give, by which one arrives at the exact date of 1844 AD. One of these biblical students, well known to the religious world and entirely uninformed of these great days, at the time of his writing, places himself on record in a work of his own, and which exhaustively teems with corroboration of the holy import of the Revelation of Baha-ullah, by saying that the Bible with unwearying persistency returns to the date of 1844. The year 1844 is one which shall ever make glad the hearts of the people of God, for in that year the Bab, in the splendour of his great mission, declared himself as a messenger, and declared that the one of whom he was but the herald was upon the earth, and would in time manifest himself to his flock. And at the time of that annunciation, the third of this great Trinity was born, Abdul-Baha, our Master, who dwells in the City of Light, by the blue and tideless sea. Well may the hearts of all the universe, seen and unseen, rejoice and sing together, and celebrate this blessed year, about which all prophecy has revolved. Moses prophesied that 3 religions and 4 manifestations of God must transpire before the day of God. We find this in Deuteronomy 33:2. And he said, The Lord came from Sinai, and rose up from Seir unto them. He shined forth from Mount Paran, and he came with 10,000s of saints. From his right hand went a fiery law for them. Reference to Genesis 27:41 will divest the mind of any confusion in connecting Esau with this prophecy concerning Seir. Sinai refers to Moses and the Mosaic dispensation, Seir to Jesus Christ and the Christian dispensation, Mount Paran to Muhammad and the Mohammedan dispensation, and the fourth is the appearance of Baha-ullah. Isaiah said that in this day he should be called God, 25:9, also 9:6. 2 rules by which we are to be guided in knowing what prophecies belong to the dispensation of Jesus the Son, and what prophecies belong to the final day of God the Father, are as follows. Those which predict the degradation of the Jews belong to the day of Jesus Christ and of Muhammad, and those which predict the period of their restoration belongs to Baha-ullah. The Lord of Hosts is his name. Out of hundreds of proofs we select a few which give the Master, Abdul-Baha, to us as he who is to rebuild Jerusalem. In Daniel's 7th chapter, beginning with the 9th verse to the 14th inclusive, we find the following. I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like the pure wool. His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. Thousands ministered unto him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The judgment was set, and the books were opened. I beheld then, because of the voice of the great words which the horn spake. I beheld even till the beast was slain, and his body destroyed and given to the burning flame. As concerning the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. I saw in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven, and came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. And there was given him dominion, and glory, and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed. This is the vision of the Book of Ages, which is unsealed, and the Son receives from the Father an everlasting kingdom and dominion. In Micah 5th chapter, first 4 verses, the 2 appearances of Christ are recorded. He, the Word, which hath gone forth in manifestations throughout the aeons of existence, is one day to be ruler in Israel, but he gives up the Israelites until she which travaileth hath brought forth. After this the scattered Israelites shall return, and he shall stand and feed the flocks of God in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God. And they shall abide, for now shall he be great unto the ends of the earth, and this man shall be the peace. Now read carefully Isaiah chapter 4 verse 2, Isaiah chapter 11 first 12 verses, Isaiah chapter 22, from 20th verse to end, Isaiah chapter 30, 26th verse, Isaiah chapter 60, verses 20 and 21, Jeremiah chapter 23, verses 5 to 8, Jeremiah chapter 33, verses 14 to 16, Zechariah chapter 3, verses 8 to 10, Zechariah chapter 6, from 12th verse to end, Hebrews 4:8, St. John 16:23. The branch, so often spoken of by the Israelitish prophets, has indeed branched from the tree of life. The Father has come with the Son. This is the return of the Lion of the tribe of Judah. This is the return of the Lamb that once was slain. By once suffering death by martyrdom, now he returns on the throne, at the right hand of the Father, and he is the sign of the end. The glory of God and the glory of the Lamb, we are told in Revelation 21st chapter, are to lighten the heavenly city, the spiritual flock of Baha-ullah. We find in this same chapter that God himself is to be with us and to dwell among us. It is said that every revelation doubles in progressiveness. In this day the veil is to be removed from the entire earth. Love, peace, faith and deeds, and knowledge of our God will be the foundation stones of the kingdom of Shiloh. The reasons for this revelation are as follows. Until today, the sacred books of all religions have been sealed. Today their seals are broken. Therefore, it is the cycle for teaching, and for bringing every religion into a knowledge of, and concord with all others. In this day, all the inhabitants of the world will be gathered into one nation. Universal peace will prevail. Bloodshed and war will cease. There will be a general language. Union and harmony will reach the highest conditions. All will be gathered under the tent of peace. Baha-ullah is the trainer of the whole universe. His teachings are the cause of the life of the worlds, the unity and harmony of the creatures, the agreement of the people, and the universal peace. Today we stand in the presence of this great revelation, and to decide whether we will have this Christ or not. Man's mere assertion that he believes in God will not save him, for the devils also believe and tremble. Such believers are as wells without water. When the Spirit of the Infinite manifests in the temple of man, to resist that word, deny it, to persecute it, is as death to the one who attempts these things. In the second epistle of St. John, we are told that at the beginning of the Christian dispensation, many there are in the world who confess not that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh. This is a deceiver and an antichrist. As it was then, so it will be now. 1900 years ago, many things were blasphemously spoken against God's messenger and Son. Thus it will be in the present time. In that day, when Jesus stood before the tribunal of Pilate, in the presence of his accusers, the chains of a common felon bound him. Yet he was the Son of God. Sacred history always repeats itself, and the greater the light, the greater will be made visible the darkness. The greater the truth, the greater the falsehood of the opposer. The more perfect the way unto God, the more terrible the doom of the one for whom the way has been opened, but who walketh not therein, and who is of those who are afar. But unto those who believe, he is precious. End of Lesson 4. End of the Revelation of Baha-ullah in a sequence of 4 lessons by Isabella D. Brittingham. Recorded by Nicholas James Bridgewater.